My aunt was somebody I thought I could trust. But when she locked me in my room for weeks on end and I had no food, no water, no phone to call for help, I started to realize she's not the woman I thought she was. So when I finally escape, I decide to do this. I'm an 18-year-old lady who's currently and literally being held hostage by my aunt, who's demanding that I sign off my will to her. My story would inspire you to rise and fight for me. There's currently 2 people in my life whom I hold in high regard. My granddad and my best friend Sasha. You're wondering about my parents, well, they're dead. They passed away about 2 years ago, and they left me a trust fund worth $5 million. The trust fund idea was great, but the terms were the issue. I need to start from the beginning if you're to understand anything I'm saying here. My parents used to be business people who owned an amusement park called Wonderland. They played the part that was expected of responsible parents by providing for me everything that I needed. But they were too strict to allow me to run wild. I did not have maids in the house, and certain luxuries that they could easily afford were kept away from me. The only times I had fun were when my Aunt Julie visited, or when I went to spend my holidays at her place. Aunt Juliet was really fun to be with. She practically spoiled me, and there were no rules around her, and I could behave as disorderly as I wanted when I was with her. So, my parents, who saw the way we bonded, set up a trust fund and put my aunt as the manager, just in case anything happened to them. My aunt would oversee the properties until I turned 19. My grandfather, who had the arrangement, was not happy. He advised my parents to place someone else in the managerial position as he saw my aunt, his daughter, as the wrong move. Well, he was right, but my parents could not see it. They argued that I was still very young and that they would live to see me turn 19 and take care and take charge of what they have given me. How wrong were they? My parents passed away 2 years ago while they were on a business trip, and I was 17 years of age. The passing of my parents was very heavy on me, and if not for the intervention of my mother's siblings, my aunt and granddad included, I probably would have sunk into depression. My grandfather gathered his kids together and informed them that he was going to take me under his wing till I turned 19 and was liable by the terms of the trust fund to take over the things that my parents had left behind. It was a great idea, and my granddad's kids had no issues with it as my granddad was 65 and still in business. My aunt, however, protested. She said she was to act in my stead since she was now the manager of the Wonderland and the rest of the things that my parents had left behind. My grandfather clarified that he was not suggesting he wanted to replace my aunt as the trust fund manager. He just said he wanted me to live with him. From the way he said it, it looked like my aunt had been eagerly and impatiently waiting to assume the role. Aunt Juliet insisted that she should live with me in the very house that was part of the trust fund, and I must confess that I was glad she did not let my grandfather take me. I mean, she had always been fun to be with whenever I was around her. So the prospect of living with her seemed cool. How wrong was I? I began living with Aunt Juliet, and she suddenly turned from the fun individual whom I've known over the years to a different person entirely. She became strict and very controlling, and you can, in a sense, liken her to my parents, except that she was way worse. Getting my monthly allowance from her was usually a struggle, an allowance that she had cut by 50%. Her excuse was that I was soon going to be in college and the money would come in handy. She made me give an account of every single dime I spent. My phone soon got spoiled, and 2 months after she had moved into the house that my parents left behind, I needed a new one. So I went to my guardian, and I knew it was not going to be easy getting the money for a phone from my aunt without having to listen to her talk my ears off. But I felt that I would get the money at the end of the day, since a phone for a girl who just finished high school was preparing to get into college was sort of necessary. I met with Aunt Juliet, and she tore me to shreds within her mouth. She talked about how I had been carelessly spending money ever since my parents passed away. She claimed I was becoming too pompous because of the mentality that there was money somewhere. I wanted to say something then, but she did not give me the chance. She noted that as my punishment, I would not get a new phone until she felt I understood the importance of being careful. I tried making her understand that the phone was necessary for me, as I needed to stay updated, to know when the colleagues of my college of interest would give the go-ahead for applicants to apply. My aunt called my words bogus talk and dismissed me. I felt bad but could not complain. It was amid her denial of giving me money for a new phone that she began announcing the launch of her perfume brand. There was nothing wrong with her wanting to launch her business brand while managing my own, but the thing seemed a little off when she decided to throw a party 3 months later to, quote, celebrate the win and how far that they've come. Aunt Juliet sent out invitation letters to family and friends, and I'm far from a rich background, just as I've said, but to be frank with you, I've never seen a party as lavish as the one my aunt threw. Everyone, including my grandfather, was in attendance, and he had to travel to see if things were truly what his daughter, my aunt, said they were. The party started, and my aunt, while giving her speech, noted that she almost gave up along the way when nobody gave her a reason to move on. For some reason that I could not tell then, Grandpa seemed unimpressed by his daughter's speech. Aunt Juliet went on to say that she had pitched her business idea to investors who saw and agreed with the vision. She noted that they had a good turnover in a short while, and that was the reason for the party. After her speech, she walked right to where Grandpa and I and the rest of the family were seated, as though she wanted to greet us. But it was clear that she just wanted to gloat. Grandfather asked how she was able to start a business and be proper enough to throw an elaborate party like that within 90 days. He ended by saying that Aunt Juliet must have paid lots of attention to her business and neglected mine to achieve her feat. My aunt felt irritated that her father felt something was not right, and I don't blame him. You know, he was a businessman who had been in business long before he gave birth to her. Aunt Juliet said the only reason her father was insinuating she was into something shady was because he had always and still saw her as a failure who could not amount to anything in life. She went on to say her father was angry because the very business that he had refused to help her set up in the past was now thriving without his assistance. Grandpa ignored her comments and decided to catch up with me about how I've been. He asked why I have not called to check up on him in the past few months, and I told him my mother's mobile device got stolen. Before he would ask why my aunt had not gotten me a new one, I explained the matter to him. He was not happy at how hypocritically my aunt was behaving. She had just organized a lavish party that was very unnecessary, and she was busy telling me about not minding my spending. He didn't confront her, though. He promised to send me a new phone once he returned, and my grandpa went back, and I did not hear from him again for a long while. Things with my aunt did not improve. I no longer had peace of mind. She ensured that I seldom visited any friends, and the only friends that she permitted me to see was my best friend, Sasha. Time went slowly by and painfully, and I was soon a few months away from being 19 years of age. Aunt Juliet recently called me to tell me that Wonderland was not doing great at all. She noted that if nothing was done about it, the amusement park could end up folding in a couple of months. Well, I was scared as anyone who was about to watch their inheritance fold up behind their eyes before they've ever gotten a chance to manage it. Auntie Juliet could see the look on my face, and she immediately said there was a way out. Well, I was very eager and willing to hear what it was. And she wasted no time in telling me that there's a certain decision that she could take that would salvage the situation at hand. But she did not have the legal standing to do so. She noted that it could be possible if I just, willed the Wonderland to her. I'd not gotten into college at the time, though I had applied, but that did not mean that I was stupid. She wanted me to sign off on my inheritance to her. What use would it be if I did so? Signing off on my inheritance was as good as losing it, and I didn't buy into her idea. She continued in her attempt to convince me by telling me that she was only going to act as the figurehead and would make sure that I was the pilot behind the scenes. She asked me to look at it from the angle of saving my parents' legacy. That statement about preserving my parents' legacy got to me, and that was when I promised to dwell on the matter before making a decision. I just planned on discussing it with my best friend to get her input. I told my aunt the next day that I wanted to visit my best friend, but she insisted that I use her phone to invite her over. I had Sasha's number by heart, so I called her up and invited her over, and Sasha came next. But before we were able to catch up on things, my aunt suddenly asked me to go to the grocery store and get a few things. The things that she asked me to get were not necessary, and we had some of the stuff in the house. Well, I didn't attach any meaning to it. I got home, and Sasha began talking. My aunt went into her room and got dressed because she wanted to go out. Well, I brought up the whole signing off to the park to my aunt thing. And my friend began telling me it's a great idea, and I would be honoring my parents by not letting their legacy die. I was not comfortable with my friend's opinion, but I knew Sasha, and I had always looked out for each other ever since we were kids, so I began considering my aunt's suggestion. My aunt soon left the house, and I was shocked by the way Sasha switched from my aunt's camp. She told me not to make that mistake. She pointed out that there is no need to sign off my inheritance to my aunt, who was still my manager and had the liberty and duty to make whatever sound decision she perceived was for the good of the firm. Well, I was trying to understand how my best friend, who was encouraging me just a few minutes ago to consider heeding my aunt's suggestion, was suddenly telling me to do the direct opposite. Sasha read my thoughts, and what she told me proved to me that my aunt was cunning. She said my aunt had sent me to the market so she could have some alone time to discuss with her how to persuade me to succumb to her suggestion. I think Sasha and her warning made me resolute in my decision to not let Aunt Juliet steal my inheritance. Aunt Juliet came back home later that evening and she called me into her room. She was all smiles as she pulled out an iPhone from her drawer and gave it to me. Well, I was happy. It's been more than a year since I've asked for money to get another phone, and I thanked her for it, and just as I was about to leave, she asked me what my conclusion was about the will. I knew my answer would possibly offend her, but I had no choice. She had to hear it. I told my aunt that I was not going to sign off the will, I'm not comfortable, and that she could try looking for other alternatives to deal with the issue. My aunt was not pleased with the answer, as she tried any way her best to convince me. I finally told her just to give me a day to discuss the issue with Grandpa and get his input, but Aunt Juliet flared up in a way that I've never seen before. She started hurling insults at me while claiming I accused her of being too incompetent to make sound judgment, when all she was trying to do was honor her late sister by keeping alive what she had toiled so hard to build. I didn't know what to do or say at that point, so I just looked at her in shock. My aunt immediately took back the phone that she's given me and said I was not permitted to leave the house or entertain visitors. I argued that I was 18 and headed to 19 in a few months, so I wasn't a baby whose freedom could be taken. My aunt simply told me that she's still in charge of my trust fund and could decide how I lived my life. I thought it was a joke, but it was not. My aunt began locking me in the house, and I since had no phone since there's no means to reach anyone for help. She would come each day after she got home to see if I've changed my mind and was ready to sign the papers that her lawyer had drafted. That was the only condition attached to my freedom. Sasha came to my house 3 days later, and that was on a weekend, to see me. But my aunt told her that I wasn't around, and she said that I've gone to college and she would prefer if Sasha cut me off and stopped coming to the house. Sasha took her leave, even though she did not buy the lie. So, having had my cunning aunt attempt to use her, she knew something was fishy. Now, you understand what I mean when I say that Sasha's one of the few people in my life that I consider important. She returned on the weekday after my aunt had left for work. I was not just locked in the house. My aunt made sure that I was locked in my room. Sasha knocked on the door of the parlor, but she got no response, and she had to turn back towards where my room was. I could see her from the window, and I could not stress enough how good it felt to see somebody who was not hostile. Sasha told me about the college lie that my aunt had just told me to make sure that, no one came looking for me. She suggested calling the police, but I stopped her. I gave her my grandfather's number and asked her to call him and tell him about the situation. It's been like a week since Sasha learned about the situation and promised to call my grandfather, but I've not seen nor heard from either of them. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Today's story is a wild ride. Sit back and relax because it's about to get bumpy. If you guys are new to the channel, just know it supports me a lot if you hit that subscribe button. Let's go ahead and jump into one of these updates. I'm currently writing this post from the hospital, where I've been for the past 3 days. It turned out that Sasha had been trying to reach my grandfather all this time, but each time she tried, the call went straight to voicemail. She finally got through to him and told him all about what happened and was still happening. My grandfather was vexed, but went ahead to make several calls to my aunt while feigning ignorance of what was happening. He asked her about me and wanted to know why my line had not been going through for a very long time. My aunt told him that I'd gotten admission into college, and I usually complained that the network coverage at my school was bad. My grandfather did nothing. He and Sasha unexpectedly showed up at the house 3 days ago and gave my aunt a dirty slap before asking to see me. My aunt could tell from the slap and grandfather's tone that he was somehow aware of the whole situation and was not ready to play games. She opened the door to my room and grandfather rushed to me. I was looking like skin and bones, but my pain was far from just physical. It hurt me, emotionally. The recent happenings have proven to me that my parents never knew that they were handing me over to the devil herself when they put Aunt Juliet as my trust fund manager. I don't blame them, though. How could they have known when she acted like a saint? Granddad, upon seeing me, turned to his daughter, who was trying her best to keep some distance between the both of them. He questioned why somebody who had a conscience would treat her own late sister's child like that. Aunt Juliet initially answered. It startled me. She said she was merely trying to take back what was supposed to be hers. She suddenly began holding my mother and granddad responsible for what had played out. She answered my granddad by asking why my late mother had usurped several opportunities that came her way, thereby denying her the actual chance to be successful. She equally accused my granddad of turning a blind eye, and even going as far as supporting my mom. Grandpa did not want to stand there and react the way he wanted to, as I needed to be taken to the hospital to have the doctors check me out. He, however, promised that Aunt Juliet would hear from him very soon. He took me to the hospital where I've been admitted since, and there are a lot of questions on my mind. Like, how my mother was responsible for my aunt not being successful, and what my aunt meant by saying Grandpa supported my mom against her. I would ask questions when I'm strong enough, but one thing I'm sure of is, my aunt is a liar, and a liar always lies. Update number 2. I turned 19 2 days ago, and it coincided with the day that I was discharged from the hospital. I got to ask grandfather what my aunt meant by her statement that she accused him and my mother of being co-conspirators in making her poor. Grandfather opened up to me about how he did his best to support his kids, including Aunt Juliet, who refused to be responsible. He said that when my mother and Aunt Juliet wanted to start up separate businesses of their own, they both wanted him to support them, but he did not have enough money to go around that time, so he decided to go with the business plan that had a better chance of survival at the time. After going through what my aunt and mom had presented to him, he decided to financially support my mother. And that was when my aunt began showing signs of hatred and jealousy. Grandpa then asked why I had not called him the moment my aunt's maltreatment began, and I told him I did not have a phone, as he had not kept his promise of sending me one. My grandfather looked at me in shock. He said he sent me an iPhone 3 days after he got back, and the delivery company had it on record that my aunt was the one who received it and claimed she gave it to me. Grandfather then said he tried reaching out to me a few times, but my line was not going through, and businesses occupied his mind. The more the days rolled by, the more I discovered the wickedness of my aunt. She had held the phone for about a year and finally acted like she was the one who bought it when she felt I was going to sign my inheritance over to her. Grandpa was so mad. He gathered his entire family together and demanded that his daughter Juliet be equally present. The entire family was gathered, but Aunt Juliet was nowhere to be. My granddad, who was boiling with anger, began telling his kids how their sister had treated me. Everyone was against Aunt Juliet, and while they were voicing out their displeasure about her attitude, she walked right in with an "I don't care" look on her face. My uncle and aunt wasted no time in attacking her, and my aunt, who came prepared for war, rebuffed their attacks. She asked them what they did when my father was playing favorites with my mom. She continued by asking if they rebuked my late mother for manipulating Granddad into giving her the money that she would use to start up her brand. She then warned them to stay clear of the matter. Aunt Juliet turned and began walking out the door. This was like 2 minutes after she came in, and my grandfather then told her and everyone else that he disowned her. His words stopped Aunt Juliet in her tracks, and I felt she wanted to become a remorseful one and all, but she laughed and said that she had quit seeing Granddad as her father so long ago. Aunt Juliet walked out, and everybody was quite honestly in shock. Update number 3. After my aunt had displayed her madness and disrespect towards her father in front of the whole family, my granddad demanded that anyone who kept in touch with her not consider him or her a child of his. Well, after that, what they saw with their own eyes, they did not heed to be told. Not at all. So, my granddad and I went to the house to pick up some documents so I could start applying for college and to equally ask my aunt to vacate the premises, since I'm now 19. My initial plan had been to allow my aunt to remain as manager of the business until I graduated from college, but with everything that's played out, I would trust no other person than Grandpa. We get to the house, and my aunt asked what we wanted without opening the door. My granddad said I did not need permission before entering the house, which my parents had left behind to me. But my aunt proved stubborn and refused to open the door. She said that the house was not rightfully mine, trust fund or not, and Grandpa immediately told her to start preparing to vacate the house within the next few days, as the rightful heir would be coming to take over. But my aunt just hissed at us. Granddad had given Aunt Juliet an ultimatum of 4 days, but while leaving we branched out to the police station, took some police, and went back to the house. Aunt Juliet was surprised to hear the blaring noise of the police sirens and watched them invade the compound like they were coming for a thief. Well, she is a thief, is she not? She did not wait for the cops to break down the door. She respectfully opened it, and they began to interrogate her. The interrogation lasted for, 5 minutes, and she was asked to vacate the building. While my aunt was busy trying to get the cops on her side, Grandpa and I were throwing her things out of the house. We did tell her the rightful heir was coming to take over, did we not? Within a few seconds, I'd say, the tables were turned. My grandpa and I were in the house while my aunt was outside with the police. It was not like she was stuck or anything. She still had the old house where she used to live if she wanted to go there. When it dawned on her that she was not coming back into the house, she pointed to her father and vowed to make the both of us pay. She turned to take her leave when Grandpa, who was now very angry, alerted the cops to hold her for theft. The cops held her and would not let her leave till she was declared of the accusation. And my aunt wondered what her father was accusing her of having stolen. Grandpa suddenly told the cops that he had sent an iPhone a year ago. But my aunt, who had received it, had taken it for herself. My aunt could not deny the fact that she had received the iPhone on my behalf. As Granddad could easily prove her wrongs, and she simply provided the phone and handed it over to me before leaving the premises. And Grandpa threatened to lock her up if she ever showed up in my life again. Grandpa would be visiting Wonderland in 2 days, when he would take over the reins of leadership. Update number 4. Grandpa had taken the management of Wonderland, and there were some things that he uncovered while going through the recordings, and it happened that Aunt Juliet had been taking the funds from Wonderland just to invest in her perfume business. And this was a huge amount of money we're talking. Grandpa's suspicions was right after all. The lavish party she threw just 3 months after starting up a business was in Wonderland, which she managed. There was no such thing as an investor who saw the potential of her business. Give me a break. All that was a lie. She just wanted to make sure Grandpa saw what was the glory. Grandpa called my attention to the discovery that he's made. The nature of the resentment and the hatred that I felt towards my aunt had been seeking a medium of expression ever since she was kicked out. I felt that she was left off too easily. After all that she's done, she just had Grandpa threaten to lock her up if she was ever a problem to me. Grandpa was barely done talking when I stormed out of the place and began heading towards my aunt's place. I did not know what I was going to do. I just knew my aunt would meet a different version of me that she has never known before. I got to my aunt's place and began banging on the door. She opened up the door and asked what I was doing at her place. I told her to immediately return every dime that she's taken from Wonderland. But she just gets mad and made me shut the door, and I immediately pounced on her. We engaged in a fight and she pinned me to the ground, but that did not deter me. My grandfather, who had been trailing behind with the cops, showed up and got my aunt arrested. It was at the police station where my aunt was told about the accusation levied against her that she began pleading with my grandfather and me to drop the case, as she would reimburse whatever amount that she's taken from my inheritance. The lady who had me pinned to the ground for a few moments ago was now pleading with me. I told her that even if my late parents came back from the grave to plead to her, I would deny them. She was locked up and I took her to court. Grandpa, her father, guided me throughout the whole process, and the hearing did not take long. The judge sentenced with a gavel my aunt to 6 years in prison, and ownership of her perfume brand was given to me. I think that's fair enough judgment since it started with my money. My aunt pleaded with me and my grandfather and the rest of the family members who were present as she was being dragged away. I'll be going to college in a few weeks, and my grandpa's currently managing the businesses, and he doesn't, however, decide when I access the money and how I spend it. I don't know about you guys, but I really honestly believe 6 years was not long enough for this person in the story. I mean, this aunt. She was absolutely out of her mind, toxic, manipulative, abusive, you name it, she covers every single red flag, and all they give her is 6 years. This is somebody who locked OP in the room, did not give her a phone, stole it from her, didn't feed her, tried to take all her money, her inheritance. I mean, how much worse of a human can you possibly be? 6 years was nowhere close to enough in my opinion, but I do want to hear from you. A lot of the commenters from the original post, they weren't happy with this story either. They were very upset about what OP went through. Let me know some advice. If you could give it to OP, what would you say? Drop it downstairs in our comment section. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate these sort of stories and animate them every single day. Only about 45% of the people who watch these videos regularly are subscribed to the channel. Just know, if you do like these videos, it helps support the channel a lot by clicking that subscribe button. Thank you for that, guys. Have a great day, and remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya.